What happens when the moon goddess chooses you, but your own pack casts you out? For Alara Nightshade, life had always been written in the margins. An Omega in the Silvercrest pack, she moved through their world like a ghost, seen but never acknowledged, present but never valued. Her days were filled with menial tasks, her nights with the ache of loneliness that came from being the lowest rank in a hierarchy that valued strength above all else. She'd accepted this fate with quiet grace, her gentle nature and healing touch the only gifts she could offer a pack that barely noticed her existence. But when Alpha King Darius Thornridge stood before the gathered packs at the lunar ceremony and severed their mate bond with a single brutal declaration, everything changed. And what happens next? No one was prepared for the rise of the first daughter, the one the prophecies called the Matriarch Reborn. The lunar ceremony happened once every decade, when the full moon hung swollen in silver, in the autumn sky. Wolves from territories across the northern reaches gathered in the sacred clearing, a massive amphitheater carved by ancient magic into the heart of the Whispering Woods. Alara had never attended before. Omegas weren't permitted at such grand affairs. But this year was different. This year, she'd felt the pull. The mate bond had snapped into place 3 days prior, sudden and overwhelming as a lightning strike. She'd been in the pack kitchens, hands deep in dishwater, when it hit. The scent of burning oak in winter storm, of ozone and steel, had filled her senses so completely she'd gasped. Her wolf, usually so quiet within her, had surged forward with desperate recognition. Mate, mate, mate. She dropped the plate she was washing. It shattered against the stone floor, porcelain shards scattering like fallen stars. Clumsy Omega, one of the beta females, had sneered, but Alara barely heard her. Her entire being was oriented toward the northern training grounds, where she knew, somehow knew, that he was waiting. Alpha King Darius Thornridge, the most powerful wolf in 5 territories, heir to the ancient bloodline of the first Alphas, and now, impossibly, her mate. She should have known better than to hope. The ceremony itself was breathtaking. Thousands of wolves packed the clearing, their excitement a living thing that crackled in the crisp night air. Alara stood at the very back, half hidden behind a massive oak, wearing her only decent dress, a simple gray thing that had seen better years. The scent of her pack surrounded her, forest loam and iron, leather and snow. But underneath it all, she could smell him. Aged oak, winter snow, pine, storm. Her mate stood on the central dais, magnificent in the moonlight. Darius Thornridge was everything an alpha should be, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar and eyes like molten amber. Power radiated from him in waves that made even the other alphas lower their heads. In respect, he wore the ceremonial armor of his station, silver etched with the symbols of the moon goddess, and at his throat gleamed the Alpha King's torque. Beside him stood Seraphina Blackthorn, the most beautiful she-wolf Alara had ever seen. Her hair was midnight silk, her eyes the color of fresh blood, and her scent, cinnamon and iron and something sharp like freshly spilled blood, spoke of danger and desire in equal measure. She was a Delta from the Shadowfang pack, bred for war, and she'd made no secret of her intention to become Darius's Luna. The ceremony began with the traditional words, spoken by Elder Moira in a voice that carried across the clearing. Under the gaze of the moon goddess, we gather to honor bonds forged in starlight and sealed in silver. Let those who would claim their mates step forward. Several pairs moved to the center. Each time a bond was confirmed, the crowd erupted in howls of celebration. Mate marks bloomed on throats and wrists, glowing. Symbols unique to each pair, visible proof of the goddess's blessing. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the bond pulling at her, a golden thread connecting her soul to his. Surely he felt it too. Surely he would. I, Darius Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Reaches, claim Seraphina Blackthorn as my chosen mate. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Time stopped. The forest went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Chosen mate, not fated mate. Her wolf howled in anguish inside her chest. Seraphina's smile was triumphant as Darius reached for her hand. But then he paused, his nostrils flared, his head turned, those amber eyes scanning the crowd with sudden predatory focus. He'd caught her scent. Lavender, morning dew, wildflowers. Their eyes met across the distance. For one heartbeat, Alara saw recognition flare in his gaze. The bond blazed between them, golden and undeniable. His lips parted as if to speak. Then his expression hardened into something cold and terrible. "There is one other matter," he announced, his voice carrying across the assembled wolves. "It has come to my attention that the moon goddess, in her infinite wisdom, has attempted to bind me to an inappropriate match." Whispers erupted through the crowd. Heads turned, searching. "Alara Nightshade," Darius commanded, "step forward." Her legs moved without her permission, carrying her through the parting crowd. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the gasps and sneers as they took in her shabby dress, her lowered head, the way she radiated submission from every pore. "An Omega," someone whispered. "Impossible," another voice hissed. She reached the edge of the dais and forced herself to look up at him. Up close, he was even more magnificent and even more terrifying. The scent of him flooded her senses, oak and snow and storm, but underneath it now, the acrid tang of determination, of decision. "You feel it," she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. "Please, the bond," Darius said loudly, "is a mistake. The moon goddess has been known to err, pairing powerful wolves with those who would only weaken our bloodlines. I, Darius Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Reaches, formally reject Alara Nightshade as my mate. I choose strength over sentiment, power over—" He didn't get to finish. The bond didn't just break. It shattered. Alara's scream tore through the night as agony exploded through every nerve in her body. It felt like her soul was being ripped in half, like someone had reached into her chest and yanked out her heart while it was still beating. She collapsed to her knees, hands clawing at the earth, as the golden thread between them snapped with an audible crack that echoed through the clearing. Her wolf retreated so deep inside her that she couldn't feel it anymore. The emptiness that remained was vast and terrible. Through the haze of pain, she heard Darius's voice, cold and formal. "Take her from my sight. She is banished from Silvercrest territory. If she returns, she will be executed." Strong hands gripped her arms, pack guards, their sense familiar but now tainted with pity and disgust. They hauled her to her feet, her legs barely supporting her weight. "Please," she gasped, looking toward the section where her parents stood. Her father, Marcus Nightshade, was a beta in the pack. Her mother, Lillian, worked in the pack house. Surely they would— Her father turned his back. Her mother looked away. The guards dragged her through the crowd. Wolves parted before them, none meeting her eyes. The scent of their collective judgment hung in the air. Satisfaction, relief, vindication. An Omega had dared to dream above her station, and now she was paying the price. They didn't stop at the pack borders. They dragged her for miles, deep into the wild forests where rogue wolves hunted, and winter came early. When they finally released her, one of them, a guard she'd once served, breakfast too, sneered down at her crumpled form. "You're lucky the Alpha King is merciful," he said. "Anyone else would have killed you for the insult." Then they were gone, their footsteps fading into the darkness. Alara lay where they'd left her, on the frozen ground beneath an indifferent sky. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Her thin dress offered no protection against the bitter wind that had begun to howl through the trees. She had no food, no water, no shelter, no wolf to warm her from within. Above her, the moon watched in silence. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes? Hours? Time lost meaning as the cold seeped into her bones. Eventually, some survival instinct she didn't know she possessed forced her to move. She crawled through the underbrush, following some half-remembered knowledge of these woods from childhood explorations she'd long forgotten. There, ahead, barely visible in the darkness, the skeletal remains of an old barn. It had probably belonged to human farmers once, before the territories had been redrawn, and this land had fallen into the neutral zone between pack borders. The roof was mostly gone, and the walls listed dangerously to one side. But it was something. Alara dragged herself inside, just as the first snowflakes began to fall. The storm hit with the fury of a living thing. Wind screamed through the gaps in the walls, driving snow in horizontal sheets. Alara huddled in the corner farthest from the gaping holes, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking so violently her teeth chattered. The bond wound in her chest throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of what she'd lost, or what had been stolen from her. She tried to shift, hoping her wolf form might offer more warmth, but her wolf was gone, buried so deep inside her that she couldn't reach it. The pain of the rejection had severed something essential, leaving her more human than she'd ever been, more vulnerable. The hours crawled past. The cold stopped, hurting eventually. That was bad, she knew dimly. That meant her body was giving up, shutting down, conserving what little heat remained for her vital organs. She could no longer feel her fingers or toes. Her lips were numb. This is it, she thought with strange clarity. This is how I die. Not dramatically, not in battle or defending her pack, just alone in a ruined barn, frozen and forgotten, cast out by the one person who should have protected her above all others. The moon goddess had a cruel sense of humor. Alara's eyes drifted closed. The darkness was almost welcoming. At least in death, she wouldn't feel the emptiness anymore, wouldn't feel the ghost of the bond that should have been. I'm sorry, she thought, though she didn't know who she was apologizing to. Her wolf, maybe, for being too weak to save them both. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat grew faint. The cold took her. Warmth. That was the first thing Alara became aware of, blessed, impossible warmth surrounding her, like a cocoon. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. Consciousness came in fragments, pieces of awareness that didn't quite fit together. She wasn't alone. The scent hit her next, pine and ancient earth, moonlight given form, something wild and powerful and utterly other. It was similar to a wolf pack scent, but magnified, intensified, layered with magic so old it made her soul ache with recognition. Slowly, fighting against the weight of exhaustion, Alara forced her eyes open and stopped breathing. Wolves surrounded her, massive wolves that made even the largest alpha she'd ever seen look small by comparison. Their fur caught the dim pre-dawn light, shimmering with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, silver threaded with starlight, black that held depths of midnight sky, white that gleamed like fresh snow under moonlight. She counted them, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They formed a circle around her, their bodies, pressed close, sharing their warmth. Each one radiated power that made the air shimmer. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 impossibly large wolves, and she was alive. They'd protected her through the night. These magnificent creatures had found her dying in the storm and had chosen to save her. Why? As if hearing her unspoken question, the largest wolf, the one whose massive head rested near her shoulder, stirred. He was enormous, easily twice the size of any alpha, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes that glowed with ancient silver light. Scars marked his muzzle and shoulders, speaking of battles won and lost. Those silver eyes met hers, and Alara felt the weight of intelligence in that gaze. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something far older, far more powerful. The wolf began to shift. The transformation was nothing like what Alara had seen in her pack. There was no cracking of bones, no painful contortion. Instead, the wolf's form seemed to flow, magic and moonlight, swirling as fur became skin, as 4 legs became 2. The change was beautiful, almost hypnotic. When it finished, a man knelt where the wolf had been. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps in his 40s, with silver threading through dark hair. His face was all hard angles and sharp planes, marked by a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. He was bare-chested despite the cold, and his skin was bronzed and marked with symbols she didn't recognize, ancient script that glowed faintly silver in the dim light. His scent washed over her, aged oak, winter snow, pine, and something else, something that spoke of distant thunder and the moment before a storm breaks. "You're awake," he said, and his voice was deep and rough, like gravel worn smooth by centuries of running water. "Good." We were beginning to worry. Alara tried to speak, but her throat was raw. She managed only a croak. The man, the alpha, she could feel his power even in human form, reached behind him and produced a canteen. He helped her sit up, supporting her weight easily, and brought the water to her lips. She drank gratefully, feeling life seep back into her body with each swallow. "Who," she finally managed, "who are you?" The hint of a smile crossed his scarred face. "I am Kirin Stormwraith, commander of the Shadow Guard, and we, Alara Nightshade, have been waiting for you." The other wolves had begun to shift as well, their transformations as fluid and beautiful as their leaders. 8 men and 1 woman emerged from the pack, each one radiating power and bearing similar glowing marks on their skin. "Waiting for me?" Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm just—" "And you are no Omega," Kirin interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You have been lied to your entire life. The power inside you was bound when you were an infant, locked away by those who feared what you would become." His silver eyes blazed with intensity. "But the rejection broke those bindings. You're free now, Alara, and it's time you learned the truth." One of the other guards, a younger man with copper hair and kind green eyes, stepped forward. "We should move her to the sanctuary," he said, his accent lilting and unfamiliar. "She needs warmth and proper food. The truth can wait until she's recovered." Kirin nodded. "Finn is right. Can you walk?" Alara tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Before she could fall, Kirin caught her, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "Rest," he commanded, and there was something in his voice, some quality of authority that made obedience seem natural rather than forced. "We have a ways to go yet, and you'll need your strength for what comes next." As the guard began to move through the forest with inhuman speed and grace, Alara felt her eyes growing heavy once more. But before sleep claimed her, she heard Kirin's voice, soft and wondering. "She's exactly as the prophecy described. The Moon Daughter, the matriarch reborn." Darkness took her again, but this time it was gentle. Alara woke to firelight and the scent of cooking meat. She was lying on something soft, furs, she realized, piled deep and warm. The ceiling above her was stone, rough-hewn and ancient, marked with the same glowing symbols she'd seen on Kirin's skin. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The chamber was large, clearly carved from living rock deep underground. Tapestries hung on the walls, depicting wolves and moons and battles fought long ago. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, and around it sat the Shadow Guard. All 10 of them were in human form now, and Alara could see them properly for the first time. Each bore the mark of a warrior, scars and calluses, the lean muscle of those who lived by the blade. But there was something else about them too, something in the way they moved and spoke that marked them as different from any wolves she'd known. They felt old. "She wakes," the woman said, her voice rich and warm. She had dark skin marked with silver symbols that spiraled up her arms, and her eyes were the color of amber honey. "I'm Kaya Swiftwater. Welcome to the sanctuary, little sister." "Where am I?" Alara asked, pulling the furs around herself. "Deep beneath the Iron Peak Mountains," Kirin answered, rising from his seat by the fire. "In chambers that were old when your ancestors' ancestors were young. This is the last stronghold of the Shadow Guard. And now, you're home, if you choose to claim it." "I don't understand any of this," Alara's voice broke. "You keep saying I'm someone important, but I'm not. I'm just Alara, an Omega who wasn't even good enough for—" She couldn't finish. The wound in her chest throbbed. Kirin crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. This close, she could see the weight of years in his gaze, the sadness of someone who'd lived too long and seen too much. "Your parents lied to you," he said gently. "When you were born, you didn't cry like normal infants. You howled, and that howl shook the foundations of the pack house. Your eyes glowed silver, the mark of the moon goddess herself. And your scent—" He paused. "Your scent spoke of lavender fields under moonlight, of spring rain and wild magic. Every wolf in the territory felt your power, Alara. They knew what you were." "What I was?" "The matriarch reborn, the first daughter, the one the prophecy spoke of." Kirin gestured to one of the tapestries, and Alara saw words woven in silver thread. "When the false bonds shatter and the moon bleeds silver light, the matriarch will rise from ash and endless night. She will be storm and mercy, power wrapped in gentleness. She will come when wolves forget the goddess." Finn joined them, carrying a bowl of stew that smelled divine. Your parents were terrified, he explained as Alara ate, so they went to a witch, a dark practitioner who knew forbidden magic. She bound your power, locked your wolf so deep inside you that even you couldn't feel it, made you appear as an Omega, the lowest rank, so no one would suspect what you truly were. But why? Alara demanded. Why would they do that? Fear, Kaya answered. The matriarch is prophesied to reshape the wolf world, to challenge the hierarchy, to bring change. Your parents valued stability over destiny. They thought they were protecting you. Instead, they stole your birthright. Alara set down the bowl, her hands shaking. And the rejection? Kieran's expression darkened. Alpha King Thornridge made a grave error. He sensed your power, even bound it called to him. That's why the mate bond formed. But he chose ambition over fate, chose a political alliance over what the moon goddess offered him. A wave of power washed over the room as Kieran's anger leaked through his control. He didn't just reject a mate, he shattered the very bindings that held your true nature captive. His cruelty freed you, Alara. And now, he smiled, fierce and proud. Now you can become who you were always meant to be. As if in response to his words, something stirred deep inside Alara's chest, a presence she'd thought lost forever. Her wolf, awakening at last, and it was furious. Pain lanced through her, but this was different from the agony of rejection. This was transformation, power long denied finally breaking free. Alara gasped, falling to her hands and knees as her body began to change. It's happening, she heard Kaya say, wonder in her voice. Her first true shift. The transformation was nothing like she'd imagined. Instead of bones breaking and reforming, her skeleton seemed to flow like water, reshaping itself in a cascade of sensation that was more overwhelming than painful. Her senses exploded outward. Suddenly she could smell everything, the age of the stone around her, the individual scents of each guard member, the magical wards that protected this place. Her hearing sharpened until she could detect heartbeats, could hear the whisper of air through distant tunnels. Her vision shifted, colors becoming more vibrant, her perception expanding to take in details she'd never noticed before. Then came the fur, silver-white threaded with starlight, emerging from her skin in a wave that sparkled with its own luminescence. Her body grew, muscles developing and strengthening as magic poured through her. Bigger, stronger, more. When the transformation completed, Alara stood on 4 legs and looked down at the guard members who knelt before her. She was massive, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, even larger than Kieran in his wolf form. Her fur seemed to hold captured moonlight, glowing with soft silver radiance. And when she looked at her reflection in the polished shield hanging on the wall, she saw her eyes. They blazed with silver fire, marked with symbols that matched those on the ancient tapestries. Her wolf spoke for the first time, and its voice was power given form. I am awake, I am free, and I am fury. The howl that tore from Alara's throat shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. The fire in the hearth flared white-hot, and somewhere far above, in the world beyond the mountains, every wolf in 5 territories stopped and tilted their heads, feeling the pulse of ancient power that rippled through the earth. When the echoes faded, Kieran shifted back to human form. He dropped to one knee, fist pressed to his heart in formal salute. All hail the matriarch, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. She has returned to us at last. The other guards followed suit, kneeling in perfect synchronization. All hail the matriarch reborn. Alara shifted back, the transformation easy now, instinctive. She stood naked and glowing with residual power, but felt no shame. This was right. This was who she'd always been. Teach me, she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Teach me everything I need to know. Kieran rose, pride shining in his ancient eyes. With pleasure, my lady, with pleasure. Days turned to weeks in the sanctuary. Alara trained from dawn until dusk, learning to harness the power that had been locked inside her for so long. The Shadow Guard proved to be patient teachers, each one offering their own unique skills. Kieran taught her combat, how to use her size and strength, how to read an opponent's movements, how to command respect through presence alone. He was merciless in their sparring sessions, never holding back, pushing her until she learned to push back harder. "Your power means nothing if you don't have the will to use it," he told her after a particularly brutal session left her panting in the dirt. "Queens must be willing to make hard choices." Finn taught her the old languages, the histories that had been forgotten by the modern Pax. He showed her ancient texts that spoke of the matriarch, the original alpha female who had united the wolves in the time before memory. "You're not just powerful," he explained, one evening surrounded by scrolls and books. "You're the inheritor of a legacy." The matriarch wasn't just strong, she was wise, compassionate, fierce. She understood that true strength lies in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Kaya taught her to hunt, to move through the forest like shadow and wind. But she also taught Alara about her gift, the empathic abilities that allowed her to sense the emotions of those around her, to soothe pain with a touch, to heal wounds through sheer force of will. "This is perhaps your greatest power," Kaya said as Alara successfully healed a gash on one of the younger guard members, "and your greatest vulnerability. You feel everything, everyone. You must learn to shield yourself, or the world's pain will drown you." The others each contributed their own lessons. Raiden Ashwalker taught her tracking and strategy. Thorn Ironhide showed her how to forge weapons and armor. Lyric Moonsinger taught her the old songs, the ones that carried power in their melodies. Zara Nightbane instructed her in poisons and their antidotes. Ash Wildrunner shared knowledge of herbs and wilderness survival. Drake Shadowmere taught her to read the stars and weather, and Rook Silentpaw, who rarely spoke, taught her the value of observation and patience. But it wasn't just training. As the weeks passed, Alara found something she'd never had in her old pack: family. They ate meals together, sharing stories and laughter. They celebrated small victories and supported each other through setbacks. When Alara woke screaming from nightmares of her rejection, it was Kaya who held her until the trembling stopped. When she doubted her own worth, it was Finn who reminded her of her progress. When she felt the weight of expectations crushing her, it was Kieran who took her outside to run beneath the stars, wild and free. She was no longer alone. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Alara asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why? Did you wait for me? How did you even know I existed?" The guards exchanged glances. Finally, Kieran spoke. "We are not normal wolves, Alara. We are the Unchained, the last of the goddess's chosen warriors. Each of us lived in the time of the first matriarch, over 2,000 years ago. When she fell, betrayed by those she trusted, she used the last of her power to bind us to the earth, to wait for her return." 2,000 years, Alara whispered. "We have walked this world for centuries," Kaya added softly, "watching civilizations rise and fall, watching the wolves forget their purpose, forget the goddess's gift. We've waited, patient and hidden, for the one who would carry the matriarch's soul reborn." "And you think that's me?" "We don't think," Kieran said firmly. "We know. From the moment you first shifted, we felt it, the resonance of the original matriarch's power. You are her, and yet you are also yourself. The goddess has given you a second chance, Alara, a chance to reshape a world that has lost its way." The weight of that knowledge settled over Alara like a mantle. She looked around at these ancient warriors who had given up everything to wait for her, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not the pain of a broken bond, but the warmth of bonds forged by choice, by loyalty, by love freely given. "Then we'd better make sure I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and strong, "because I have a feeling our time here is running short." She was right. 3 days later, Rook burst into the training chamber, his normally impassive face tight with urgency. "Scouts," he said shortly. "Silvercrest Pack. They've found the sanctuary." Kieran's expression turned grim. "How many?" 23 wolves, led by Alpha King Thornridge himself." Rook's dark eyes found Alara's. "They know you're alive, my lady, and they're demanding your surrender." A wave of power washed over the chamber as Alara's anger spiked. Through the empathic link she'd developed with the Shadow Guard, she felt their battle readiness, their eagerness to protect her. But she didn't need protection anymore. "How long until they reach us?" she asked calmly. They're at the entrance now, Rook replied. Shall we engage? Alara stood, her movements fluid and sure. Over the past weeks, she'd grown into her power, learned to carry herself with the authority she'd been born to wield. She was no longer the frightened Omega who'd crawled into a barn to die. She was the matriarch reborn, and it was time to face her past. No, she said. I'll meet them myself, but I want all of you with me. She smiled, fierce and wild. I think it's time the Northern Reaches learned what true power looks like. The Shadow Guard grinned back, their battle joy palpable in the air. As you command, my lady, Kirin said. As you command. They emerged from the sanctuary into the dying light of afternoon. The entrance was a natural cave mouth in the side of Iron Peak Mountain, and before it stood the Silvercrest War Party. 23 wolves in fighting formation, each one a skilled warrior, and at their head, Alpha King Darius Thornridge in all his terrible glory. He looked exactly as Alara remembered, powerful, imposing, radiating dominance. But now, seeing him through eyes unclouded by the mate bond, she could also see his arrogance, his insecurity masked by aggression. He wasn't as tall as she'd thought, wasn't as impressive. He was just a man, terrified of losing control. Behind him stood Seraphina Blackthorn, her scarlet eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Her scent, cinnamon and iron and blood, hung heavy in the air, and Alara could smell her anticipation, her hunger for violence. Alara Nightshade! Darius's voice boomed across the space between them. You were banished from Silvercrest territory. Your presence here, so close to our borders, is an act of war. Surrender yourself for judgment, and your death will be quick. Alara stepped forward, flanked by the Shadow Guard. She wore simple leather fighting gear that Kaya had made for her, and her hair hung loose down her back, silver white like her wolf's fur. She was barefoot on the cold stone, but felt no discomfort. I am not on Silvercrest territory, she said, her voice carrying clearly. These mountains fall within the neutral zone, and I answer to no Alpha King. Darius's eyes narrowed. You dare. I dare many things now, Darius Thornridge. Alara smiled, showing teeth. You made quite the mistake that night, didn't you? You thought you were rejecting a worthless Omega. You had no idea what you were truly casting aside. She's delusional, Seraphina hissed, stepping forward. Let me end this, my king. Let me tear her throat out and be done with it. By all means, Alara said softly. Try. Seraphina didn't need to be told twice. She shifted mid-leap, her transformation brutally fast, and lunged at Alara with claws extended and fangs bared. She was beautiful in her wolf form. Midnight black with blood-red eyes, larger than most females, trained for war since childhood. She was also entirely outmatched. Alara didn't shift. She simply moved, faster than Seraphina could track, and caught the attacking wolf by the throat mid-air. Power surged through her grip, not enough to kill, but enough to make her point. Seraphina yelped in shock as Alara slammed her into the ground with enough force to crater the stone. The impact drove the air from Seraphina's lungs. Before she could recover, Alara was on her, one hand pinning her throat, the other glowing with silver light. I could end you, Alara whispered, her voice deadly calm. I could snap your neck like kindling, but I am not cruel like you. I am not petty. She leaned closer, letting Seraphina see the silver fire in her eyes. I am merciful. Remember that. She released Seraphina and stood, turning her back on the gasping she-wolf with perfect disdain. The Silvercrest wolves had backed away, fear rolling off them in waves. Their hackles were raised, their bodies low in instinctive submission. What are you? Darius demanded, though his voice shook. I am what you rejected, Alara replied. I am what your fear and arrogance set free. She gestured to the Shadow Guard. And these are my Unchained, my warriors, my family. At her signal, the 10 guards shifted. The transformation stole the breath from every Silvercrest wolf. Because the Shadow Guard didn't become normal wolves. They became something far greater. Dire wolves of legend, each one massive and marked with glowing silver symbols, their eyes blazing with ancient power. They were the goddess's chosen warriors, and they were magnificent. Kirin alone was larger than Darius's wolf form. Together, the 10 of them radiated enough power to make the very air shimmer. The The Silvercrest war party broke, wolves scattered, whimpering, their tails tucked in terror. Only Darius remained standing, though he trembled with the effort. Slowly, his legs buckled, and he sank to the ground in submission. "Mercy," he gasped. "Please, I didn't know." Alara walked toward him, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She stood over the cowering Alpha King and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. The bond had been truly severed, the pain a distant memory now. "You had your chance for mercy," she said quietly. "You had your chance to accept the goddess's gift. Instead, you chose power and pride. You cast me out to die, Darius Thornridge. You humiliated me before the gathered packs. You broke something sacred because you were too blind to see its value." "I was wrong," he said, and tears streaked down his human face as he shifted back. "Please, Alara, I was arrogant and foolish. I see it now, what you are, what you were always meant to be. Give me another chance. Let me make this right. I'll break my bond with Seraphina. No." The word fell like a judge's gavel. "I don't want you, Darius. I never did. Not truly. What I wanted was acceptance, belonging, love. You could have given me those things, but you chose not to. And now?" Alara smiled sadly. "Now I have found them elsewhere. I have found family who chose me not because of fate or bonds, but because of who I am. I have found my purpose, and I have found my power." She turned to address the entire Silvercrest group. "Hear me now, wolves of the northern reaches. I am Alara Nightshade, the matriarch reborn. I claim these mountains and all territories within 100 miles as my domain. Any who wish to join me, who wish to live under a new law, one of fairness and strength tempered with mercy, are welcome. Those who refuse may leave in peace, but you will never enter my lands again." "What of us?" Darius asked hoarsely. "What of Silvercrest?" "You will return to your pack," Alara said, "and you will tell them what happened here. You will tell them that the old ways are dying and something new is being born." Her eyes found Seraphina, still lying in the crater, gasping for breath. "Seraphina Blackthorn, I banish you from the northern reaches. You sought to take what was not yours and showed no mercy to those weaker than you. Now you will know what it feels like to be cast out and alone." Seraphina's eyes widened in horror, but she couldn't speak, couldn't protest. "As for you, Darius Thornridge," Alara paused, considering, "you will remain Alpha of Silvercrest, but you will implement new laws. Omegas will be treated with dignity and respect. Pack members will be valued for their character, not just their rank. And you will send emissaries to the other packs, telling them that change is coming. Whether they embrace it or resist it is their choice." "And if we refuse?" one of the other Silvercrest wolves dared to ask. Kieran shifted back to human form, his scarred face hard. "Then the Unchained will visit your territory, and we will not be gentle." The message was clear. Darius struggled to his Darius' feet, his pride in tatters but his life intact. "It will be done," he said hoarsely. "Your word is law, matriarch." "Then go," Alara commanded, "and do not return unless I summon you." The Silvercrest wolves retreated, dragging Seraphina with them. Alara watched them disappear into the forest, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settle over her shoulders. "That was well done," Kieran said softly, coming to stand beside her. "You showed strength and mercy in equal measure. The matriarch would be proud." "The matriarch is proud," Kaya corrected with a grin, "because she's standing right here." Alara turned to her chosen family, these ancient warriors who had waited centuries for her return, and felt her heart swell with emotion that had nothing to do with mate bonds or destiny. "Thank you," she said simply, "for waiting, for believing, for everything." "You're Our Lady," Finn said, his green eyes warm. "Our matriarch. Where else would we be?" As they made their way back into the sanctuary, Alara felt Kieran's hand brush against hers, not possessive, not claiming, just there. A question and an offer in one simple touch. She laced her fingers through his, feeling the rightness of it. This wasn't a bond forged by magic or destiny. This was choice, free and unencumbered. "When this is over," Kieran said quietly, "when you've finished reshaping the wolf world and claiming your throne, would you consider taking a mate? Not because the goddess demands it, but because you want to? Alara looked up at this scarred, ancient warrior who had shown her nothing but respect and loyalty, who had taught her to be strong without losing her compassion, who had waited 2,000 years and would wait 2,000 more if she asked it of him. "I would consider it," she said, her smile soft and genuine, "very much." His answering smile was worth more than all the mate bonds in the world, and so Alara Nightshade's journey came full circle. Cast out as a worthless Omega, she rose as the matriarch reborn, powerful beyond measure, yet never losing the gentleness that had always been her greatest strength. She learned that true power doesn't come from rank or bloodline, but from the courage to be yourself and the wisdom to lift others as you rise. In the months that followed, her domain grew. Wolves from across the territories came to seek her wisdom, drawn by tales of a queen who ruled with both strength and compassion. The old hierarchies began to crumble as Alara proved that Omegas could be powerful, that Alphas could be kind, that true strength lay not in domination, but in protection of the vulnerable. Darius Thornridge kept his word, implementing the new laws and sending emissaries far and wide. He never regained what he'd lost, never stopped regretting the choice he'd made that night under the full moon. But he became a better Alpha for it, learning humility in the shadow of his greatest mistake. Seraphina disappeared into the wild lands, and no one mourned her absence. The Shadow Guard remained at Alara's side, her unchained warriors and chosen family. And when the blood moon rose 6 months after her awakening, bringing with it whispers of an ancient evil stirring in the southern wastes, Alara knew her true test was only beginning. But that's a story for another time. What did you think of Alara's transformation from rejected Omega to powerful matriarch? Could you feel the moment when everything changed for her? How would you have handled Alpha King Thornridge's rejection? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and share it with anyone who loves werewolf tales of redemption and power. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We've got more stories of magic, destiny, and fierce female leads coming your way. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next chapter.